Okay, JB, it's time for an update on this Roadster. Tell me where we're at.
We've finally received the color approval. What we do, because of the nature of what we're doing, we send an actual sample as a proposal of the gel-coated surface with the fiberglass so that the customer can take it in his hand. We're not looking at a color chip or some representation. It's the actual color itself that we're proposing to use so that when he buys off on it, we have a mating sample that we've made at the same time.
Okay.
So there's no question. Colors are very subjective. People react to colors very differently. So we gotta be mindful of the fact that color is very important.
Okay, well you said gel coat. What's the difference between paint and gel coat?
Well, gel coat is the material that is sprayed on the surface of a fiberglass part. There's always a gel coat.
Okay.
When you look at a Corvette or you look at a boat, you're looking at gel coat. The difference being that in the case of Corvettes, as an example, they do the car body in usually just a white or a gray gel coat color, because they're going to be introducing paint. Okay, so they have both. In the case of our cars, because we're in limited production, we can actually integrate the color of the car that the customer wants into the gel coat itself. Which means that there's no subsequent primer, there's no subsequent sanding, there's no subsequent painting.
So you're skipping a lot of steps, really.
It skips a lot of steps, a lot of expense. And the really interesting thing is that we can match just about any color that they can mention. In this case, it's a dark blue, with the exception that it's more difficult, if not impossible, for us to integrate metal flake. Now you can do that, but then we're right back to a complicated process that's troublesome and fraught with the possibilities that you're not going to get it the way they want. So you just say, no metal flake. We're just going to leave that off the table. You can get very attractive colors without the use of metal flake, but everybody's become accustomed to seeing it that way, especially in modern cars. But modern cars are a composition of 3 different colors. There's a base coat, a color coat, and a clear coat. And so now what people are accustomed to seeing is these 3 together, and that's how you get that depth. That's how you get that really beautiful look. But it's a problem if you're trying to make something from scratch and you want to integrate it into it to begin with. We're trying to sell durability. We're trying to give them something that if you scratch it, you just sand it and buff it. You don't have the same delicate kind of relationship that the paint has to the body.
Wow.
And it's a very tenuous bond. Paint is always only a few thousandths thick. It's very easy to damage it, and permanently. So
is a gel coat thicker than normal paint?
Gel coat can be as much as 30 times as thick as paint.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when you damage it, there's plenty of material left over. If that color is consistent and is that thick, let's use mils, because paint is sometimes as little as 3 or 4 mils. Gel coat can be as much as 30 or 40 mils. So you can see that there's a way different amount of material there. There's also a lot more material to repair if the car brushes up against something or gets scratched, which is what happens to cars. I mean, you park it in the parking lot and Mrs. McGillicuddy opens her Cadillac door and puts a big scratch in your car. People walk alongside of it, grocery carts, there's all kinds of things, accidents. In Arizona, we have something called Arizona pinstripes, and that's really where you've been out in the brush and something rakes along the paint and puts these white lines on the clear coat. And that's a problem. Very difficult to get rid of them. You can go through to the color, and now you've got an entire paint job to consider. With gel coat, it's much tougher, and it has to be. You use it on boats and recreational types of equipment, and it has to put up with a lot of abuse. And as a consequence, we've learned to make it in a particular color for a particular customer. Okay. So in this case, it's a dark blue. A lot of them are red or black or cream or a number of other colors that we've done. But we can do any color within reason, and that's one of the nice things about what we do. Okay. We're the only company that I know of that actually offers the cars in the finished color.
Cool. Now these pieces here to the 35 Roadster, They look like they're kind of black right now.
Well, the black is black because it allows us to see problems with the mold itself. If the mold is not good, the parts will obviously not be good either. So we have to keep, in order to keep track of the quality and the surface quality of the mold, we use black or a dark red.
Is
black
this a
is actually
black
preferable.
resin or is it a gel coat?
It's actually
also?
a tooling gel coat. It's a gel coat made out of polyester resin fillers, but it's a higher quality of gel coat than it would be for a gel coat for an actual finish on a boat or a car, because it has to take thermal cycling. When you get this part in the process of making parts, the elevated temperatures can go up to over 100 degrees. So this has got to be temperature stable, much more so than what paint would be. So we do it in black so we can see what we're doing. Here's a perfect example. This was prepared and waxed an hour ago and we've already got dust on it. Okay, that obviously cannot last. We've got to have to clean it again right immediately before we put on coats of mold wax. They'll check it again and make sure that we don't have any more of this dust. And then we're going to have to gel coat it immediately to keep the dust out and away from the surface of the car, because it affects the color of the car. Right. And we can't have that. Gotcha. After that, we can just go forward with the hand layups and that sort of thing, because now the mold and the part are together. Okay.
When you say gel coat could be 30 or 40 mils, is that all in one pass, one coat?
Typically, yes. I mean, it can be a couple of passes because of the complexity of these. You really have to be very good at shooting gel coat. Honestly, it's much more complicated than paint because you're not really just concerned about appearance. You want to keep a consistent level. If you corners are always a problem, because if you shoot it 2 or 3 times, the gel coat's going to build up in the corners. And then remember, this is a catalyzed material, so if it gets thicker in one area than in the other, it'll warp. So we can't have that. We have to have a consistent layer of about 20 to 30 mils. So he'll put on coats of 5 to 10 mils, 5 to 10 mils, 5 to 10 mils, sneak up on it so that he doesn't have any high concentrations in the corners, which would cause drawing and warpage in the part itself.
Another term you just used, catalyzed.
Right.
Can you explain what that means to someone who's not up to date on that?
All polyester materials and all fiberglass materials are inert until you introduce a catalyst. The catalyst has a simple function. It sets off a reaction inside the resin that causes it to solidify. So there is a material in the resin itself, usually a cobalt and some other accelerators, that when they experience the presence of catalyst, which is the generic name for it is peroxide. When those two guys make contact with one another in the mix of the resins and the catalyst, it sets off a chain reaction, which in turn causes the material to harden in the final state. That's why when you have to be very careful you don't put too much catalyst in it, because what will happen is it'll cure too quickly and actually draw away from the mold and cause a problem. So you have to hit it just right on the money in terms of the amount of catalyst, and the amount of catalyst is predicated on the temperature, the ambient temperature of not only the air around the product, but also the mold itself.
Okay, so if it's kind of a chemical reaction that's happening then, how does that affect what we would call drying time with paint? Is it any different?
Well, the amount of catalyst that you put in dictates the amount of drying time. And we're looking for an hour as just a baseline. In general terms, it's nothing that says it can't be 65 minutes or 45 minutes. And a lot of that is dictated by the ambient temperature. If it's a hot day, then we're going to have faster cure times unless we lower the amount of catalyst. So we're always looking for that half an hour to 1 hour cure time, not only with respect to the gel coat, but also the hand laminated resin that we're going to use to put the actual fiberglass on. We want the same kind of a gel time, because that means it's going to gel properly without overheating and causing warping and distortion.
Cool. Okay. Well,
it's really important to hit those. And this is all based on experience. We have graphs that tell us if it's 70 degrees, we want 2 cc's in a quart, and we have all that worked out. at some level, these guys have been doing it so long, they don't even need to consult the chart any longer.
Right. So does that mean when you've shot it and it's set up for an hour or two, whatever the time is, does that mean the material's already ready to work with that quickly after that?
It's more than that. There's a window in which you have to lay it up. And so when he's timing his process, he doesn't want to start anything too late in the day, because ultimately he's got to plan his day around prepping the mold, getting the gel coat on it, giving it the requisite amount of time to cure sufficiently so he can come in and put his first layup. If you start that process in the middle of the day, he's going to be home in bed about the time this thing would be ready to be hand laid, and that's not good. So we have to basically plan the whole thing around a start date, and then we lay it up, and that means that the cure will be happening overnight. When he comes in the next day, he can put on another layer. So a lot of timing to it.
Okay. So when you say layup,
we're going to take pieces of mat, we're going to wet them out with resin, just barely enough, because resin, as we like to say around here, is the enemy.
Right.
Resin is not your friend. It is the agent that wets out the fiberglass. The fiberglass is the strength of the laminate. The resin is simply a binder. So if you get carried away with putting too much resin, you cause all kinds of problems. Warpage, the laminate becomes brittle because it's more resin than fiberglass. So you want to keep your layups dry as possible. And that's why we looked at a layup before, or even a chopper gun, where it looked dry on the top. That's the way it's supposed to look.
Okay. Now, one thing I want to make sure I make clear is this looks all shiny and perfect, and it looks like to an untrained eye maybe that this is actually the finished piece, and you're just going to paint over it, so to speak.
Yeah, if you notice,
this is actually a mold. Is that
this is
correct?
the mold. If you look at it carefully, you notice that it's inside out.
Yeah.
These are female molds, so they're going to be a female version of a male part.
That's right. So that piece over here, let's just walk over to this piece in the back.
Right.
This big piece, it looks like you're setting to do the inside of a car body, but it's actually the outside of the mold.
This is the inside of the mold, and this is a breakaway. So there are some undercuts here. If you notice, there are some breakaways. So this back section of the car, obviously, if this was all one piece, we couldn't get the part out of the mold. So obviously, we had to make a breakaway such that this undercut right here wouldn't trap the part in the mold. Right. So this piece comes away and allows that section to go down, and now the body can be built all in one piece.
Interesting. So the breakaways are parts of the mold that break away, leaving a one piece behind.
Right, and the more of them, the better. A lot of car bodies, unfortunately, are made, let's be kind and say they're not really made properly, but a lot of it is because they make a million little parts and then try to graft it back together, because they have that same undercut problem and they don't know how to do breakaway molds. It sounds hard to understand, but this is fairly complex. I remember the first time that we took this to a show in Los Angeles, I had one of the oldest guys in the fiberglass business come over to me and ask me how I did it. Wow. He was absolutely stunned that we could make a body all in one piece. And I said, well, I'm a tooler.
Yeah.
That was the...
It's your thing.
Yeah, I was trained by a guy who actually worked on the tail section of 747s. If you want to get, that's going way back, but he was a master tool maker, and he taught me a lot of the secrets that we still use to this day.
That's really cool.
Yeah. These are also breakaway molds. They're going to go on the jams.
Okay.
Okay. You can see that this one will come out, see, because you have to kind of imagine in your mind this stuff coming out of the mold.
Yeah.
So this undercut right here is not going to trap the part, because it can come up and go this way.
Okay, yeah, so you've always got to think in a way of how does it come away.
It's complicated, it really is, and it's a mind bender if you don't, especially on these round cars.
With all the curves and corners, like, that's amazing.
So if we're concerned about it coming out, we put a breakaway there, and we allow the part to still always be made. It makes the tooling very complicated sometimes, more complicated than most guys are willing to do. But I was told a long time ago, either do it the proper way or just stop and don't do it at all. That was my advice from a very wise guy, and I'm glad he challenged us to do that, because that's exactly what we did.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to see this body done. We'll look forward to seeing the gel coat put on, and then we'll follow up with another one. This
Yes.
is very educational.
Yeah,
Thank
it's going
you,
to be
JD.
fun. We're really looking forward to see it.
Excellent.